welcome to my channel. Today I'm sharing 3 new projects using my Cricut Maker. If you are new to the Cricut world and you're wondering which projects would be best to start out with, these 3 would be perfect. I really hope that you enjoy today's video. If you do, please give it a thumbs up and share it. It really helps out my channel. And I do want to thank Cricut so much for sponsoring today's video. Now let's go ahead and get started. For the first project, I'm going to be showing you step-by-step how I create my own farmhouse-ish sign. I'm in my Cricut Design Space and I went over to where it says text on the left-hand side and I'm typing in my word farmhouse because this is one of the words I'm going to be using on my sign. I'm then going over to the text icon again and I'm typing in what's going to be like my second word, which is a dash, an ISH for ish. Now I'm changing the font on farmhouse, so I selected the word farmhouse and I went up to font. Now it pulls up all of the fonts on Cricut Design Space, which there are so many to choose from and it could take forever to find one. So for the sake of the video, I already had one picked out and this one is called Cream Candy and I selected that. Now Cream Candy is one that I did download from dafont.com, but Cricut Design Space has so many other ones to choose from on its own. So as you can see, the font that I selected is a script font and none of the actual letters are connected, so I'll need to connect those. I just went to the top right hand side and ungrouped all of my letters. So now they're individual and I can just start grouping them all together to make one word. I really like to use the grid lines that are on the back of my canvas in Cricut Design Space to help me keep all of my individual letters straight and in line when I'm grouping them together. Once I have all of my letters the way I want them to be, I'm highlighting the word farmhouse and then going and grouping them all together. So now they are all grouped together. Now for my word ish, I'm going to be changing the font. I'm just selecting that and then going back up to font. And for this one, again, there's so many to choose from. I already had a font picked out for the sake of this video, so it didn't take me forever. This one I'm using an Adobe font, so I just changed that and now I'm resizing it to the size that I want and putting it next to the word farmhouse. Then I'm highlighting both of them together and going to the top right hand side and selecting group. This has now grouped both of the farmhouse and the ish together to make one piece. And then going over to image and selecting an image for my Cricut Design Space. They have so many to choose from, but I know that I'm going to be wanting to use a cow. So I typed in cow in the top search bar and then just scrolled through all of the cow images on Design Space and chose the one that I wanted and then clicked insert image on the lower right hand side. I know that I want to add another image as well, so I went back to images and then this one I'm typing in leaves because I know I want to add some kind of leaf to my picture. So I'm going through all of the leaves that are in the Cricut Design Space and I actually chose 2 different ones because I wasn't sure which one I wanted to use. So once I had both of them selected, I went to insert image on the bottom right hand side and it pulled up both of the leaves into my canvas. Now, I ended up going with the one on the left-hand side and I just resized that to the size that I wanted it to be. And I did end up duplicating it once I had it to the size that I wanted it to be. And to do that, you just right-click on the image and then you hit duplicate and that will bring up an image exactly the same. And then I did flip it a little bit horizontally so that I could put one on the other side of my cow. And I just kept working with the image until it was exactly the way I wanted it to be, and I did delete the leaf image that I did not want to use. Next, I'm highlighting my image and my words together, and then I'm going to the bottom right hand side and clicking weld. This is welding my images all together to make one so that my Cricut Maker will cut one image. I'm then pulling up my image in Design Space on my mobile device. This is just easier for me to do it this way because my Cricut Maker is not connected to my computer and I have it in a different area of my house. I did want this resized a little bit, so I went to customize and I'm just customizing the sign a little bit larger than what I had originally made it before I start cutting. So now it's all set and I'm ready to make it. I do not need to mirror my image and my mat, my 12 by 12 mat is fine. I clicked continue, and then it's gonna pull up where I select my materials. The material I'm using is just my everyday vinyl, so I selected that. And then for the pressure, it usually is at default, but I wanted to have a little bit more pressure, so I selected that, and now it's all ready to be cut. The vinyl that I'm using is this removable vinyl. It is a matte black vinyl for today's project. And whenever you're putting your everyday vinyl on your cutting mat, you always want to place it vinyl side up. I placed the vinyl in my Cricut Maker, and now I'm just letting it do its thing and cut out my design. Once my design is all cut out, I'm placing my mat down on my table and I'm peeling the vinyl away from the mat. This is just the easiest way I found to remove it. This is what the image looks like when it's all cut out before I've weeded it. And now I'm just gonna start the weeding process. I did have some extra vinyl on both sides of my cow image, and I did cut those out because I know I can use this vinyl for smaller projects. I'm using my weeding tool from Cricut, and I always like to work in sections when I'm weeding out my vinyl. I do a little bit of a section and then I cut that off. This just helps me from getting like the sticky vinyl attached to another piece of the vinyl that I don't want removed. And personally, this is just the way I like to do it. Everybody does it differently, but this is the way that's worked best for me so far. Now that I have my vinyl all ready, I'm going to be moving on and creating the background that my vinyl is going to go on. For this one, I'm using 2 scrap pieces of wood that I had in my craft stash, and I'm painting them both with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I did do 2 coats of this paint. Once the paint was completely dry, I used my Folk Art chalk paint in the color Castle on a Dollar Tree stencil brush, and I dry brushed this color on both of the pieces of wood to give them a rustic farmhouse distressed look. Next, I'm attaching the 2 pieces of wood together. I placed hot glue on the bottom side of the top piece of wood and then just pressed that onto the bottom piece of wood. Then to ensure that they're gonna hold together really nicely, I used 2 large popsicle sticks and I cut the ends off to the length to go on the back side of my 2 larger pieces of wood, and then I just hot glued those popsicle sticks along the back side. Now that my wood's all ready, I can go back to my vinyl. I've already cut my transfer tape down to the correct size to place over my image, so I'm just placing that on top of my image, and then I'm using my Cricut scraper tool to press that vinyl onto the transfer tape so that I can transfer it onto my wood surface. I'm then centering my image onto my wood piece. When I get it exactly where I want it to be, I'm then using my scraper tool once again to press that vinyl down onto my wood. Once I think I have it pressed on there really well, I'm then removing my transfer tape. Once I had the image on, I decided it needed a little something extra. So I'm using some of these sticker dots from Dollar Tree, and I'm placing them around all 4 edges of my sign. I know the red looks a little crazy, but I'm gonna be painting over those here in just a minute once I have the dots all the way around all 4 sides. The paint color I'm using to paint over all of the dots is the same color that I painted my wood. It's the Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster. I did 2 coats of this paint on all of the red dots, and I know I could have saved myself so much time if I would have just done this in the beginning, but I didn't, so it is what it is. Once all of that white or plaster colored paint was all dry, I then went back in with that Castle color chalk paint from Folk Art, and I painted over all of the dots and any of the areas that I needed to re-distress since I repainted. For the last step on this project, I needed to add a hanger, so I'm using some of this rope and I'm tying a knot on one end, seeing how long I want my hanger to be, and then cutting that down to size and tying a knot on the other end. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to do the hanger on the front side or the back, but I just decided to do it on the back side, and I'm using hot glue on the back side of the wood and then just pressing that rope on top of the glue. Once the glue was on, I thought that it probably needed a little something extra to hold it into place, so I used my staple gun and ended up stapling the rope down to the back side. And this is my farmhouse-ish sign all finished. I love that I was able to create this own design myself using Cricut Design Space. Now moving into the second project today, I'm going to be making my own stencil to create my own sign. So for this one, I'm starting out by going to shapes and I'm selecting a square. Now, if you want to try to resize this, it's gonna stay in the square shape unless you go down on the left-hand side and unlock it. So now I can create pretty much any shape I want with it. And I wanted mine to be a little bit more of a rectangle shape, so that's why I unlocked it. Then I wanna add text. So for this one, I'm adding the letter H. I'm also adding a second text, the letter M, and then I'm gonna add a third text, the letter E. And for this stencil, I'm gonna be creating the words home. So once I have all of my letters selected, I'm going to images. And again, Cricut Design Space has so many images to choose from, but I know that for this project, I want to have a wreath. In the search bar, I typed in the word wreath and it pulled up all of the wreaths in Cricut Design Space. I selected the one I wanted and then went down to insert image, and it's now pulled it up on my canvas. Now for all of the text that I have, the H, E, and M, I'm changing all of the fonts to an Adobe font. Again, I've mentioned this several times in the video. There are so many to choose from. I just know that personally I like this Adobe one the best. So I'm selecting that one, and then I went ahead and changed the other two letters to that same font as well. Now I'm placing all of my letters onto my shape and getting those resized to the size that I'm gonna want my letters to be for my stencil, and then also the wreath, and I'm resizing that. Once I have them all resized, I'm then removing the shape from behind and I'm highlighting the wreath and all of my letters together, and I am grouping them together. But I actually forgot I didn't need to group them together. I actually need to weld them together. So I'm highlighting them all, and then I'm going to weld at the bottom right hand side. Now this is welding them together to be one image. I'm then placing that one image on top of my shape again. I'm then highlighting the shape and my image together all in one, and then I'm gonna be slicing, which is on the bottom right hand side. I'm selecting slice, and this is slicing out that image from my shape, which has now created my stencil. And then I can delete the other two images. I don't need those anymore. I just need the stencil part. I now have my image all pulled up on my mobile device so I can start cutting. For this one, I do not need to mirror my image, and my 12 by 12 mat is fine. For this one, the material I'm using is my vinyl, so I'm selecting that. And then for my pressure, I am selecting more on this one, just like the last project. The vinyl that I'm using is this Cricut Stencil vinyl. It has a grid on the front, and then the back side is this plain white matte surface. And for this one, you do want to place it on your cutting mat with vinyl side up, just like you would with the everyday vinyl. I then placed it in my Cricut machine and I let it cut out my stencil and do its thing. Once my image is all cut out, I'm then removing my vinyl from my cutting mat, and then it's time to weed out all of the vinyl for my stencil. Now normally when you're weeding, you're gonna weed out all of the vinyl around your design, but since I made a stencil, I need to weed out the actual design. So all of my letters and then my wreath, I'm weeding all of that vinyl for that design out. Now that my stencil's all made, I need to create the surface that I'm gonna be using my stencil on, and it is this square block shape that I got from Michaels. I'm painting it with a Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I did 2 coats of this paint. Once the paint was dry, I took some sandpaper and I sanded around all of the edges, and then I sanded a little bit on the front surface as well to give this a distressed look. Next, I can go back to my stencil. I'm using my Cricut transfer tape, and I'm going to be placing that over top of my stencil, and this is going to transfer the stencil onto my wood surface. So once I have the transfer tape all on, I'm then using my Cricut scraper tool to just press that stencil onto the transfer tape. I'm then removing the transfer tape that now has my stencil on it, and then I can apply my stencil to my wood surface. I'm placing my stencil in the center of my wood block, getting it exactly where I want it to be, and then I'm using my Cricut scraper once again to press the stencil onto the wood, and then I'm removing the transfer tape. Now my stencil is all ready to be used, and for all of my letters H, M, and E, I'm using the Folk Art chalk paint in the color Rich Black, and I'm using a Dollar Tree stencil brush to apply that, and I'm just building up the color like I normally do. And then for the wreath, I'm using the Folk Art chalk paint in the color Sage Shadow. After all of the paint has completely dried, I'm then removing my stencil. Here is my home sign all finished. If you guys have seen any of my previous videos, you know I love using stencils, so being able to customize and create my own has been a life changer. Now for the third project today, I'm going to be creating an iron-on for a bandana for my new puppy. So I went in my Cricut Design Space and I went over to images, and I know that I want to use a dog bone on this. So in my search bar, I just typed in dog bone and I started looking at all of the images that Cricut Design Space has with dogs and dog bones. Well, I found one. It was a heart shape with a dog bone in the middle, and I thought this would be super cute. So I selected that one and I inserted the image in my canvas. Now here it is in my canvas, and I'm just resizing it to the size that I want. And then I know that I want to add text in the middle of that dog bone. So I'm selecting text, and then I'm typing in my puppy's name, which is Cooper. So I just typed that, and I've actually already selected the font that I want for my text. I just resized my text down to fit inside of the dog bone. Then I'm highlighting all of that together and I'm selecting weld. And this is welding everything together to be one image and one cut on my Cricut Maker. The iron-on vinyl that I'm going to be using for my design is this orange color one. It is a matte side on the back and then a glossy side on the front. If you want to know more about Cricut vinyls, I have a video all about vinyls, and I'll have that link down in the description box. Anytime you are doing an iron-on, you always want to place your vinyl glossy side down on your cutting mat. And you also want to mirror your image as well. I have this all pulled up on my mobile device because this is how I always like to cut my images, just because like I said earlier in the video, I have my machine separate from my computer. Here I'm mirroring my image because you always want to make sure that you do that anytime you're doing an iron-on. And then again, it's just on a 12 by 12 mat, and then I am also going to be doing more pressure on this as well. And then for your material, obviously I'm going to select the everyday iron-on. I've placed my cutting mat with my vinyl in my machine, and I let the Cricut Maker cut out my design. After my machine is all done cutting my design, I then removed my vinyl from my cutting mat, and then it's time to weed out the vinyl from around my design. Now this iron-on vinyl is by far the easiest for me to weed because the vinyl that you're removing is not sticky like other kinds of vinyls. The sticky part is the film backing. I made sure to get out all of the vinyl from in between my letters as well because I have forgotten to do that before and have ruined projects, so just make sure that you do that. For this project today, I am using this white cotton bandana that I picked up from Hobby Lobby. It was 99 cents. I'm folding it in half, and I'm using my Cricut Easy Press 2 today. For the recommended cotton material that I'm going to be using it on today, it was recommended to do 300 degrees for 15 seconds. So I was setting my Easy Press 2 for that. And then I'm using it for about 5 seconds on the front side of my bandana to warm it up and get any of the moisture that's in the fabric out before I use my iron-on vinyl. And then placing my vinyl exactly where I want it to be. And then I'm using my Easy Press 2 over top for 15 seconds with light pressure. After that 15 seconds is up, I'm then flipping my bandana over, and then I'm doing an additional 15 seconds at 300 degrees on the back side. Then once everything has cooled, I'm removing the film backing. Here is the bandana all finished. I think it turned out super cute, and I was able to get a quick pic of my new puppy Cooper wearing it. I hope that you guys enjoyed today's video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and share it. It really helps out my channel. If you're not subscribed, I hope that you will consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching.